My name is Alex, and I'm an adventurer and archaeologist. I've spent years traveling the world, uncovering ancient secrets, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened in Epping Forest, England. When I received the assignment to explore the depths of this ancient woodland, I was filled with excitement. Little did I know, I was stepping into a nightmare that would haunt me forever. Epping Forest is a sprawling expanse of greenery, rich in history and folklore. Legends of strange occurrences and sightings of ghostly figures have surrounded the forest for centuries. As I stood at the edge, the air felt thick with an energy I couldn't quite place. I brushed off the chill that crawled up my spine, attributing it to the dense canopy of trees and the eerie silence that enveloped the area. Armed with my tools and a sense of determination, I ventured deeper into the woods. The trees towered above me like ancient sentinels, their gnarled branches reaching out as if trying to pull me into the shadows. As I began my excavation at a site rumored to be an ancient burial ground, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I tried to focus on my work, but the rustling of leaves and distant whispers kept drawing my attention. That night, as I set up camp beneath the sprawling branches, I felt an overwhelming sense of isolation. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that danced menacingly around me. I made a fire, hoping its warmth would dispel the darkness encroaching upon my mind. But as I sat there, the crackling of the fire was soon replaced by something else, an unsettling silence. It was then that I heard it, a soft, sorrowful wailing echoing through the trees. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. Was it the wind playing tricks on me? Or was there something, or someone out there? I forced myself to investigate, clutching my flashlight tightly as I ventured further into the dark. The deeper I went, the louder the wailing became, twisting into something almost human. I stumbled upon a clearing, where the moonlight illuminated an old stone altar. It was covered in moss, and the air around it felt charged with an unseen force. As I approached, I noticed carvings etched into the stone, symbols I had never seen before, pulsating with an otherworldly glow. Against my better judgment, I reached out to touch the altar. Instantly, the air grew colder, and I was engulfed by a whirlwind of memories and voices. Images of ancient rituals flashed before my eyes, sacrifices made in the name of forgotten deities. Panic surged through me as I realized the forest was alive, its history steeped in blood and sorrow. Suddenly, I was not alone. Shadows materialized around me, figures cloaked in darkness, their faces hidden but their intentions clear. They advanced slowly, their whispers growing louder, chanting in a language that twisted my thoughts. I could feel their anger, their pain, and their desire for revenge. I turned to run, adrenaline surging through my veins, but the forest seemed to shift, the path disappearing as I stumbled deeper into its clutches. Branches clawed at me, and the wailing grew into a cacophony of tormented souls. My heart raced as I desperately searched for an escape, but the shadows were relentless, whispering secrets that threatened to engulf my mind. In my panic, I recalled the stories of those who had ventured into Epping Forest and never returned. Had I become another victim of its dark allure? The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. My curiosity had led me here, and now I was paying the price. Just as I thought all hope was lost, I caught a glimpse of the moonlight filtering through the trees ahead. I sprinted toward it, the shadows clawing at my back. I burst into the clearing where I had set up camp, collapsing by the fire. The flames flickered wildly, casting dancing shadows around me as I fumbled for my gear. I gathered my things in a frenzy, adrenaline coursing through my veins. But as I turned to leave, the wailing rose again, now sounding like a chorus of anguished souls. I looked back, unable to tear my gaze away from the forest, the shadows swirling, beckoning me to join them. I had to escape. I sprinted through the underbrush, ignoring the pain in my legs, my heart pounding in my chest. The forest felt alive, a creature in itself, as it shifted around me, trying to reclaim what I had disturbed. Just when I thought I was lost forever, I stumbled upon the path I had taken earlier. I emerged from the forest, gasping for breath, the cool night air hitting me like a splash of cold water. I could still hear the wailing behind me, echoing through the trees, and I knew the forest would never forget. It had claimed a part of me, and I would never return. The experience left me shaken, and as I drove away from Epping Forest, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The shadows lingered in my mind, a constant reminder of the mistakes I had made. I had ventured too far, and the cost of my curiosity was more than I could bear. Never, I told myself, would I underestimate the stories whispered in the dark. Epping Forest was not just a place of beauty and history. It was a realm of shadows, and I had trespassed where I shouldn't have. I was no longer just an archaeologist. I was a survivor, forever changed by my encounter with the unknown. As I sit here, recalling my experience in Epping Forest, I realize how much this ancient woodland represents the duality of human exploration and the dark history that often lies beneath the surface. Epping Forest is not just a collection of trees and pathways. It is a living, breathing entity with a past that intertwines with the lives of those who dare to enter. The forest has been a site of both beauty and terror for centuries, shrouded in folklore and steeped in mystery. My name is Alex Reynolds, and I am an adventurer and archaeologist with a passion for uncovering the truths of the past. The thrill of discovering lost civilizations and forgotten artifacts drives me, yet I often find myself lost in my own ambitions. For years, I have traveled to various corners of the globe: Egypt's ancient tombs, the ruins of Machu Picchu, and the temples of Angkor Wat. Each expedition has enriched my understanding of humanity's journey, but my venture into Epping Forest would be unlike anything I had ever encountered. When I first received the assignment to investigate the archaeological potential of Epping Forest, I was intrigued by its rich history. Spanning over 2,400 acres, the forest is a remnant of the ancient woodlands that once covered much of England. It has been a hunting ground for royalty and a refuge for the common folk, yet it also holds darker secrets that many choose to ignore. Legends tell of witches, lost souls, and tragic events that have unfolded within its confines, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding as I read through the stories. To better understand the forest, I delved into its history. Epping Forest was designated as a royal forest in the 12th century and has seen countless generations come and go. The notorious highwayman Dick Turpin roamed its paths, and during the English Civil War, it became a battleground for those fighting for control over the land. It is said that the spirits of those who perished in conflict still haunt its trails, their sorrow lingering in the air. As I read these accounts, I couldn't help but feel a connection to those who had walked before me, their lives intertwined with the very soil I would soon tread. I set out for Epping Forest with a small team, each member bringing their own expertise to the expedition. There was Sarah, a brilliant historian with a knack for connecting historical dots; Marcus, a skilled geologist who understood the land's physical makeup; and Lila, a botanist who could identify the various plant species that thrived in the area. Together, we formed a tight-knit unit, bonded by our shared excitement and curiosity. However, as we prepared for the trip, I sensed an undercurrent of tension among us. Epping Forest had a reputation for being unpredictable. I had heard stories of explorers going missing, never to be found, or of those who returned changed in ways they couldn't explain. My team dismissed these tales as mere folklore, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the forest than met the eye. The air crackled with an ancient energy, and as we approached the tree line, I could feel my heart racing. Perhaps it was a mix of excitement and fear. After all, exploration always carries its risks. As we set up camp on our first night, the forest enveloped us in darkness. The trees loomed overhead, their branches intertwining like skeletal fingers. I could hear the distant sounds of wildlife, but there was something unsettling about the stillness that surrounded us. It felt as if the forest was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. That evening, I gathered my team around the fire to share stories of the forest's history. Sarah recounted tales of the witch trials that had taken place nearby, while Marcus spoke of the geological formations that hinted at ancient civilizations. Lila, ever the skeptic, laughed off the ghost stories, but even she couldn't ignore the palpable tension that filled the air. We tried to lighten the mood with jokes, but a shadow hung over our camp, one that we couldn't quite name. As I lay in my tent that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The sound of rustling leaves echoed in my ears, and every snap of a twig sent a shiver down my spine. I knew I needed to focus on our mission, yet my mind was consumed by the stories of the forest and the potential for discovery. Little did I know that my fixation on the past would lead me to a confrontation with forces beyond my understanding. In the days that followed, we began our excavation at a site rumored to be an ancient burial ground. As we dug deeper into the earth, the atmosphere grew heavier, and the shadows seemed to thicken around us. I could sense my team's unease. Their laughter had faded, replaced by furtive glances and hushed whispers. It was as if the forest was reacting to our presence, testing our resolve. During one of our excavations, we uncovered what appeared to be a ceremonial artifact, its surface engraved with cryptic symbols. The moment I touched it, the air crackled with energy, and an overwhelming sensation washed over me. It was then that I realized we had unearthed something that should have remained buried, a relic of a time long past, a time when rituals were conducted under the watchful eyes of unseen entities. The forest was alive, and it demanded our respect. I should have heeded the warnings, but my ambition clouded my judgment. The deeper we delved into the forest's mysteries, the more we disturbed the delicate balance between our world and the unknown. What I had initially seen as an opportunity for discovery soon became a descent into a haunting abyss. The further we explored, the more I realized that Epping Forest was not merely a site for archaeological exploration. It was a realm of spirits and ancient energy, and we had awakened something that would change our lives forever. As we continued our exploration of Epping Forest, the conflict began to crystallize around us, rooted in the tensions between our ambitions as archaeologists and the ancient forces we had disturbed. Each day brought new discoveries, but with them came an unsettling presence that seeped into our minds and hearts. The thrill of finding artifacts was overshadowed by an ever-growing sense of dread, and the forest seemed to come alive with whispers that echoed through the trees. After our initial discovery of the ceremonial artifact, Sarah became increasingly convinced that we had stumbled upon a significant historical site. She urged us to conduct more extensive excavations, believing we could rewrite parts of England's history with what we found. However, I started to feel an instinctive urge to pull back, to honor the sanctity of the ground we were disturbing. As my unease grew, so did the rift between us. The first real signs of trouble appeared during our second night in the forest. Lila had taken to studying the local flora, becoming fascinated by the native plants. She claimed to have found a rare flower that only bloomed in areas with significant historical energy. While she rambled excitedly about the flower's potential, I noticed the shadows around our camp were deeper, darker. The moonlight barely penetrated the dense canopy overhead, and an unnatural fog crept in, making the air feel thick and suffocating. That evening, as we sat around the campfire, I recounted the stories of lost explorers I had heard before our trip. It was meant to be a cautionary tale, a reminder of the need to respect the land and its history. Instead, my words seemed to hang in the air, amplifying the tension. Marcus, who had been quiet for most of the trip, finally spoke up, expressing his discomfort with the growing darkness in the forest and how we might be attracting unwanted attention. "We're playing with fire here," he said, his voice low and urgent. "The energy in this place isn't just about history, it's alive. We need to be careful." But Sarah brushed him off, her eyes glinting with excitement. "This is what we've dreamed of. Imagine what we could discover. We can't let fear hold us back." Despite her confidence, I sensed her bravado was partly a mask for her own growing fear. That night, as I lay in my tent, I heard faint cries echoing through the trees like distant wails of the lost. Sleep eluded me, and I kept the lantern by my side, feeling the weight of something unseen pressing down upon me. The next day we found more artifacts, broken pottery, remnants of what appeared to be ancient tools. Each discovery felt like a breadcrumb leading us deeper into the forest's heart, yet the atmosphere grew more oppressive. With every item we unearthed, I could feel the forest's resentment growing. The air was charged with a palpable energy, and it was becoming increasingly difficult to shake off the feeling that we were being watched. Lila began to act strangely. At first, I thought it was just stress from the expedition. She would spend hours alone, wandering into the thickets, often returning with odd items she claimed were gifts from the forest. "It's like it's talking to me," she said one evening, her eyes wide with wonder. I felt a chill run down my spine at her words. I wanted to believe that she was merely caught up in the excitement, but a part of me feared that she was losing her grip on reality. As we ventured further, I decided to pull back on our excavations, suggesting we spend time analyzing our findings instead. I was met with fierce opposition. Sarah and Marcus argued passionately about continuing our work, claiming we were on the verge of uncovering something monumental. I found myself increasingly isolated, the rift between my vision for the expedition and theirs widening. They were driven by ambition and the potential for discovery, while I was haunted by the dark implications of what we might unleash. One evening, Sarah insisted on returning to the site of our first major find. Despite my misgivings, I reluctantly agreed, hoping that perhaps if we went together, I could help temper her excitement with caution. We arrived at the clearing, a place that had once felt full of promise, but now felt like a portal to something sinister. As we worked, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The birds had fallen silent, and the air grew heavier with each passing moment. Just as we began to make sense of our latest findings, a sudden chill swept through the clearing. The wind howled, sending leaves swirling around us, and a deafening crack echoed through the trees. A large branch broke free from a nearby tree, crashing down dangerously close to where we stood. Panic surged through me. "We need to leave," I shouted, my voice barely audible over the rising wind. But Sarah was transfixed by the area, her eyes glazed over as if she were in a trance. Suddenly, Lila appeared, her face pale and drawn. "We shouldn't be here," she gasped, grabbing my arm. "The forest doesn't want us here." Her words snapped Sarah from her stupor, but the tension had escalated to a breaking point. The forest seemed to close in around us, shadows twisting and curling as if alive. Sarah's defiance flared again, and she shouted, "This is our chance. We can't let fear control us." Before I could respond, a low rumble echoed through the forest, and the ground beneath us shook. The trees creaked ominously, their branches thrashing wildly, as if warning us to leave. I grabbed Sarah's arm, pulling her away from the site as Lila tugged at my other arm, urging us to retreat. Our frantic dash through the underbrush felt surreal, the darkness pressing in from all sides. The forest had transformed into a labyrinth of terror, each twist and turn only deepening our confusion. It was as if the very land itself was conspiring against us, guiding us away from our previous excitement and towards an unknown fate. The conflict had morphed from an external struggle against the forest to an internal one within our team. As we fled, I realized our expedition had become a battleground of wills, ambition clashing against caution, history against the unknown. Epping Forest had become a character in its own right, a protector of its secrets, an arbiter of our fates. What had once been an exploration of history had turned into a desperate fight for survival. We were at the mercy of forces we could not comprehend, and I feared that our ambition had cost us dearly. As our expedition into Epping Forest unraveled, it became evident that the conflicts we faced were not merely about our ambitions as archaeologists. Beneath the surface tension of our primary narrative lay a web of subplots, each revealing complexities about our characters, motivations, and the very nature of the forest itself. These layers added depth to our journey and contributed to the overwhelming sense of dread that enveloped us. One subplot that emerged was the personal history between Sarah and Marcus. While they had once been close colleagues, a silent rivalry had festered beneath their professional camaraderie. Marcus, a skilled archaeologist in his own right, had always been in Sarah's shadow, despite his expertise. As we excavated the site, it became apparent that Marcus harbored deep insecurities, feeling that Sarah's ambition overshadowed his contributions. This rivalry often manifested in heated discussions, where Marcus questioned Sarah's motives, insinuating that her reckless ambition was endangering the team. "Do you even care about the consequences, Sarah?" Marcus had snapped during one of our debates over the excavation plans. "It's like you're willing to sacrifice us for a shot at glory." Sarah, fiercely defensive, retorted, "You think this is about fame? This is about discovery. We're on the brink of something monumental. Don't let your jealousy cloud your judgment." Their exchanges created an undercurrent of tension that affected the entire group, creating divisions and alliances. I found myself caught in the middle, trying to mediate but feeling increasingly isolated. I sympathized with Marcus's concerns, but I also understood Sarah's passion for her work. The forest, with its mysteries and potential discoveries, became a battleground for their rivalry, complicating our mission and heightening the stakes. Meanwhile, Lila's subplot began to unfold as she became more entwined with the forest's ethereal elements. Her fascination with the ancient flora and the whispers she claimed to hear from the trees began to draw her further away from our group dynamic. As she collected samples and notes, I noticed her shifting from a cautious researcher to someone deeply enmeshed in the forest's lore. One evening, she shared her findings, claiming that the forest held a spiritual significance, a consciousness that could sense our intentions. "I think it's trying to communicate with me," she said, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and fear. "There's something sacred here, and we're trampling on it." I felt a chill at her words, sensing that her beliefs were straddling the line between research and obsession. I tried to engage her in conversation, to bring her back to the scientific perspective, but her eyes lit up with an intensity that made me uneasy. The forest had become more than just a backdrop. It was an entity she believed we needed to respect. Her growing detachment from reality added another layer of complexity, as I worried she might become a liability. In contrast, my subplot centered on my own struggle with the choices I had made in coming to the forest. A nagging sense of doubt plagued me. Had I come here for the right reasons? As the youngest member of our team, I had joined this expedition to prove myself, to escape the shadows of my own insecurities. However, as the forest revealed its darker side, I began to question whether my motivations had been purely professional or driven by a need for validation. Every night, when the shadows grew long and the trees whispered in the wind, I found myself wrestling with the moral implications of our actions. We were trespassing into a realm that demanded reverence, yet our ambitions pushed us to dig deeper, uncovering relics that had been buried for centuries. Each artifact we unearthed felt like an intrusion, a violation of the stories hidden within the soil. I grappled with the weight of our actions and the potential consequences, feeling increasingly trapped between my aspirations and my conscience. As the subplots developed, the forest itself became a character, shaping our conflicts and guiding our fates. There were legends about Epping Forest, stories of lost souls, ancient rituals, and protectors of nature. Each member of our team reacted differently to these tales, with Sarah dismissing them as mere folklore, while Lila embraced them as a part of the forest's living history. Marcus, however, seemed torn between skepticism and belief, often using humor to mask his discomfort. One day, as we rested at the base of an ancient oak, Lila recounted a legend she had uncovered. "They say that those who disturb the ground without permission awaken the guardians of the forest," she warned, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "It's not just a superstition. There are forces here that can't be controlled." Sarah rolled her eyes. "That's just a story to scare children, Lila. We're professionals. We can't let fairy tales dictate our work." But Lila's words hung in the air, and I could see Marcus shifting uncomfortably, as if he sensed the truth behind her warnings. The atmosphere felt charged with a tension that was hard to ignore. The subplots we were navigating were like threads in a tapestry, each one influencing the other, and contributing to the larger narrative of our descent into chaos. As the days passed, the complexity of our relationships deepened. The pressures of the forest began to fracture our already tenuous bonds. Arguments erupted over excavation strategies, with Sarah and Marcus clashing more frequently. Each disagreement heightened the stakes, as we were caught between our individual ambitions and the ominous warnings surrounding us. The turning point in our expedition came as we unearthed a peculiar stone tablet, covered in ancient markings. It radiated an unsettling energy that sent a jolt through the air. Sarah was convinced it was the key to a major historical discovery, but as we gathered around it, Lila's warnings echoed in my mind. I could see the fear creeping into Marcus's eyes, and I knew we were standing at the precipice of something far more significant than we had anticipated. With the arrival of the stone tablet, the subplots intertwined with our central conflict, pushing us toward a reckoning. The forest, with its history and hidden guardians, loomed over us, demanding accountability for our choices. The whispers grew louder, the shadows darker, and I realized that we were not just uncovering history. We were awakening something that had been lying dormant for far too long. As we moved forward, the stakes rose. Our individual stories and struggles would collide with the very essence of Epping Forest, forcing us to confront not only our ambitions, but also the consequences of our actions. In the end, it was clear that the subplots we navigated were not separate from our main conflict. They were integral to our journey, adding layers of complexity and foreshadowing the terrifying events that were yet to unfold. The atmosphere in Epping Forest shifted dramatically on the day we unearthed the stone tablet. It was an overcast morning, a heavy blanket of clouds hanging low in the sky, as if the forest itself sensed the tension brewing among us. We had been digging in a clearing known for its ancient oak trees, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal hands, when Marcus's shovel struck something hard beneath the earth. "What the hell is this?" he muttered, brushing dirt away to reveal the outline of the tablet. It was rectangular, its surface covered in intricate carvings that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. The moment I laid eyes on it, I felt a chill run down my spine, a sensation I had come to associate with something profound and disturbing. Sarah knelt beside Marcus, her eyes widening with excitement. This could be monumental. If we can decode these markings, we might be uncovering something that has been lost for centuries. But as they began to clear the area around the tablet, I couldn't shake the unease that settled in my stomach. Lila, who had been gathering herbs nearby, paused and approached us, her brow furrowed with concern. "We need to be careful. The legends about this forest, they're not just stories. What if we've disturbed something that should have remained buried?" I could feel the tension crackling in the air, a mixture of anticipation and dread. Sarah dismissed Lila's fears, insisting that we were on the verge of a groundbreaking discovery. Yet I couldn't help but remember the warnings I'd heard from the locals before we started our excavation. Warnings about angering the spirits of the forest. They spoke of ancient guardians who watched over the land, protecting its secrets. But ambition clouded our judgment, and we pushed forward. As the team worked feverishly to uncover the tablet, the whispers in the wind grew louder, almost like an unsettling chorus urging us to turn back. But we were too enthralled by the potential of what we had found. My heart raced with a mix of excitement and trepidation, caught in a whirlwind of emotions as I helped clear away the last remnants of dirt. When the tablet was finally fully exposed, its carvings became clear. They depicted intricate scenes, figures in ritualistic poses, animals entwined in a dance, and strange symbols that felt both familiar and alien. I could see Sarah's eyes glistening with ambition, while Marcus hovered uncertainly, his earlier bravado replaced by a growing sense of doubt. Lila stepped back, a look of horror etched across her face, as if she could see something we could not. "Something isn't right," she murmured, glancing around as though the trees were listening. "We should cover it back up. We're not ready for this." "Don't be ridiculous," Sarah snapped, her voice sharp. "We're on the brink of a major discovery. We can't just walk away now." At that moment, the wind picked up, rustling the leaves in a cacophony that felt almost like a warning. The ground beneath our feet trembled slightly, a subtle quiver that sent shivers down my spine. I exchanged glances with Marcus, who looked just as unnerved as I felt. Despite Sarah's enthusiasm, an instinctive part of me screamed that we were treading dangerous ground. The turning point hit when we decided to take photographs of the tablet for our records. I was documenting everything when Lila suddenly cried out, pointing into the trees. "Look, there's something moving." We all turned to follow her gaze, squinting into the shadows between the trunks. For a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a figure, tall, dark, and shrouded in mist, slip behind a tree. My heart raced as dread settled in. "It's just the light playing tricks," I said, trying to dismiss the sudden fear gripping my chest. But Lila shook her head vehemently. "No, it was real. I can feel it. It doesn't want us here." Sarah rolled her eyes, her determination unyielding. "We're not leaving. We've come too far. We can't let a little fear stop us now." I felt a surge of frustration at her dismissal of our concerns. But what if she's right? We should at least consider the possibility that we're inviting something dangerous into our lives. Ignoring my protest, Sarah instructed us to set up camp near the tablet for the night, eager to gather more data. As dusk fell, the atmosphere thickened with tension. The darkness in the forest deepened, and I could sense the eyes of the ancient trees upon us. The temperature dropped sharply, and an uneasy stillness settled over the clearing. That night, as we huddled around the campfire, I could feel the weight of the tablet looming in the darkness beyond the flickering light. Our conversations grew strained as each member of the team wrestled with their own fears and desires. Sarah remained fixated on the potential discoveries we could make, while Marcus and I exchanged glances, a silent agreement passing between us that something was deeply wrong. Lila sat apart from us, her gaze fixed on the tree-line, as if waiting for something to emerge from the shadows. Her earlier enthusiasm had dimmed, replaced by a haunting look of foreboding. "We should leave," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Tonight, we've disturbed something we can't understand." "Why are you so afraid?" Sarah challenged, a flicker of irritation in her tone. "You're letting these myths get to your head." "I'm afraid because I know there's truth in them." Lila shot back. "The forest has a way of protecting itself. If we don't leave now, we might not get another chance." In the heated argument that followed, I felt a rift forming among us. It was a turning point, not just in our expedition, but in our relationships. The divide between Sarah's ambition and Lila's fear grew sharper, leading us toward a crisis that felt inevitable. As night enveloped us, the air filled with an otherworldly tension, and the forest seemed to breathe with a life of its own. The trees whispered secrets in the darkness, and I could sense that the forest was aware of our presence, aware of our transgressions. It was a palpable force, an ancient power that had been disturbed, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. That sense of impending doom solidified when the first shriek echoed through the night, a sound unlike anything I had ever heard, piercing through the silence and wrapping around us like a cold, clammy hand. The forest shuddered, and we all froze, staring into the darkness, fear radiating through our bodies. "Did you hear that?" Marcus gasped, his face pale. "It came from the direction of the tablet," I said, dread pooling in my gut. "Lila was right," Marcus continued, backing away instinctively. We need to get out of here. Now. But before we could make a move, the ground trembled violently beneath us, and the forest erupted in chaos. Trees creaked and groaned, branches snapping as if in protest. I glanced back at the tablet, now shrouded in an ominous glow that seemed to pulse with malevolence. In that moment, I understood the turning point we had crossed. The forest was awakening, and we were unprepared for the storm that was about to unleash its fury upon us. The expedition had transformed from a quest for knowledge into a desperate fight for survival, and the stakes had never been higher. The once familiar forest had turned into a living nightmare, and I knew we had to confront the consequences of our actions before it was too late. The ground beneath us quaked violently, sending tremors up my legs as I stumbled, struggling to maintain my balance. Panic rippled through the group, each of us caught in a whirlwind of fear and disbelief. The once tranquil Epping forest had transformed into a chaotic scene, echoing with the sounds of breaking branches and distant, chilling howls that seemed to resonate from the very heart of the woods. "Get to the tent," Sarah shouted, her voice slicing through the confusion. But I was frozen, staring at the tablet, which now glowed with an otherworldly light, illuminating the fear etched on my companions' faces. It was as if the forest itself had come alive, the very earth responding to our disturbance. "Lila!" I called, searching for her amidst the chaos. My heart raced as I realized she had disappeared into the shadows. Where did she go? She was right here, Marcus yelled, his voice rising in panic. She just vanished. "Lila!" I shouted again, my voice swallowed by the cacophony around us. My gut twisted with fear for her safety. In that instant, I understood that we had triggered something ancient and dark, a force that didn't just want us to leave but demanded it. The howls intensified, echoing through the trees, a sound that felt primal and alive. I could feel it in my bones, a warning, an omen of what awaited us if we did not heed the call to flee. Yet Sarah remained resolute, her ambition blinding her to the danger surrounding us. "We can't just abandon the tablet. It's our chance at a discovery that could change everything," she shouted over the roar of the wind. "Are you out of your mind?" Marcus shot back, his face pale with fear. "Lila's missing, and this forest is not just a backdrop for your dreams. We have to go now." Before Sarah could respond, a sudden gust of wind knocked the tent off its stakes, sending it flying into the trees like a piece of paper caught in a storm. The chaos was palpable. The forest seemed to be closing in on us, branches whipping through the air like angry fists. Panic surged through me, and I knew we had to leave. "Let's get to the car," I urged, my voice hoarse with urgency. I turned to grab my gear, but before I could move, the ground beneath us erupted in a violent shudder, knocking us all to the forest floor. I felt a cold rush of dread as I realized this was no ordinary tremor. The forest was reacting to our presence in a way I had never imagined. "Help!" A voice pierced the air, echoing from the depths of the woods. It was Lila's voice, a desperate cry that sent chills down my spine. My heart raced with the thought of leaving her behind, but the raw terror coursing through me urged for survival. "Lila!" I shouted, scrambling to my feet. "Where are you?" "Follow my voice," she yelled, her tone laced with fear. "Come on!" I shouted at Marcus and Sarah, gesturing towards the sound. "We have to find her." Reluctantly, they joined me as we moved toward the source of the cries. The forest felt alive, the trees twisting as though they were trying to ensnare us, the underbrush crackling with an energy that filled the air with dread. Each step felt like a violation of an unspoken pact with the ancient spirits that guarded the forest. As we approached a clearing, the cries of Lila grew louder, and our fear intensified. My heart raced, each beat echoing the urgency of the moment. We reached the clearing, and what we saw sent a shockwave of horror through me. Lila stood at the edge of a pit that seemed to have formed out of nowhere, her body rigid and pale, staring into the depths. The ground around her rippled, as if the earth was breathing, and dark, twisted roots writhed at the bottom of the pit, reaching out like fingers grasping for something, perhaps her. "Lila!" I yelled, rushing toward her, but before I could reach her, she stumbled back, her face twisted in terror. "No! Don't come closer!" she screamed, her voice trembling. "It's watching. It wants me." The howls intensified, echoing in a dreadful symphony that sent shivers down my spine. The tablet's glow flickered ominously, casting eerie shadows that danced across the clearing. I could see now that the roots were not just part of the earth. They were alive, pulsing with a dark energy that seemed to resonate with the cries of the forest. "Lila, we're here. Just step back," Marcus shouted, but she was transfixed, caught in a web of fear that held her in place. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the clearing, and the ground beneath Lila began to crumble. I lunged forward, reaching out for her, but before I could grab her hand, she fell into the pit, disappearing into the darkness below. My heart sank, a mix of anguish and terror washing over me. "No!" I screamed, the word tearing from my throat. My instinct to save her collided with the realization that the forest was now our enemy, and I felt a heavy weight settle over me, a sense of helplessness I had never known. "Lila!" Sarah cried, her eyes wide with horror as she collapsed to her knees. I felt my own despair rising, a wave of guilt crashing over me for failing to save her. The forest roared with fury, branches lashing out as if punishing us for our trespass. The wind howled through the trees, carrying the echoes of Lila's screams, haunting us as we stood paralyzed with grief and terror. "Run!" I finally shouted, snapping out of my stupor. "We have to get out of here. We're not safe." As we turned to flee, I could feel the forest closing in around us, the air thick with an oppressive energy. The path back to camp seemed to shift and twist, as if the woods were conspiring to keep us there. Each step felt heavier than the last, weighed down by the knowledge that we had unleashed something we couldn't control. "Don't look back!" Marcus yelled, but my instincts betrayed me, and I glanced over my shoulder, catching sight of the glowing tablet one last time. The roots writhed and twisted as if reaching for us, the forest alive with an ancient malevolence that threatened to swallow us whole. In that moment, I realized that the consequences of our actions extended far beyond our own safety. We had disrupted the delicate balance of the forest, and now it was demanding its due. Our reactions, rooted in panic and regret, only fueled the chaos that surrounded us. We were trespassers in a world we couldn't begin to comprehend, and the haunting memory of Lila's cries would linger with us long after we escaped. With adrenaline coursing through my veins, we plunged deeper into the forest, our breaths ragged, our hearts pounding, as we ran from the darkness that had awakened and sought its revenge. In the wake of the terror we had unleashed in Epping Forest, the days that followed felt like a blur of disbelief and sorrow. We managed to escape the clutches of the forest, but the horror of losing Lila haunted us relentlessly. Each night, I would lie awake, tormented by the echoes of her screams that seemed to reverberate through my mind, relentless and unyielding. The guilt weighed heavily on my shoulders, a constant reminder of the choices that had led us to that cursed clearing. Marcus and Sarah were no better off. We had emerged from the forest physically intact, but we carried wounds far deeper than the scratches and bruises we had sustained. Our shared experience had created a fragile bond, but it was one strained by the knowledge of what we had lost. The camaraderie that had initially fueled our expedition had transformed into a tapestry of unspoken grief, each of us grappling with the weight of our actions. Returning to the outside world felt surreal. The vibrant life of the city, bustling with people and sound, clashed violently with the oppressive silence of the forest that lingered in my mind. I could still feel the forest's pulse, the rhythmic beating of ancient roots beneath the ground, and I could hardly breathe when I thought of Lila's absence. I had gone to Epping Forest as an adventurous archaeologist, driven by a desire to uncover the unknown. Now, I was a haunted man, stripped of my innocence and thrust into a world that had suddenly become unforgiving. Weeks turned into months, and I found myself standing at the edge of a precipice, looking down into the abyss of my own despair. I had quit my job, unable to face the memories associated with the expedition, and every day felt like an exercise in futility. My friends were in similar states, each wrestling with the haunting specter of Lila's disappearance. We had lost more than just a friend. We had lost a piece of ourselves in the forest. In a moment of desperation, I decided to seek therapy. I realized that I couldn't navigate the labyrinth of my thoughts alone. It was in those sessions that I began to confront my guilt, learning to vocalize the fear that had kept me paralyzed. I spoke of the dread I felt when Lila vanished, the overwhelming sense of failure that threatened to swallow me whole. The therapist encouraged me to explore the depths of my emotions, to peel back the layers of regret and anger I had constructed as a protective barrier. At first, I resisted, feeling unworthy of healing, burdened by the belief that I didn't deserve to move on. But with each session, I began to understand that healing was not about forgetting. It was about acknowledging the pain and finding a way to live alongside it. Slowly, I started to process the loss, recognizing that Lila's spirit would always be a part of me, a guiding force reminding me to honor the life she had lived rather than dwell on the tragedy of her departure. Meanwhile, Marcus and Sarah also sought their paths to healing, each finding solace in different ways. Marcus returned to his love of photography, capturing the beauty of life through his lens as a means of reclaiming joy. He began to document local nature scenes, his photos filled with vibrant colors and life, in stark contrast to the darkness we had experienced. Sarah, on the other hand, threw herself into community service, finding purpose in helping others who had experienced loss. She became involved in a charity that focused on mental health awareness, using her own experiences to help those in need. As we began to reconnect, it became clear that we were all seeking the same thing: redemption. We formed a small support group, meeting once a week to share our experiences and feelings. We talked about Lila, laughed and cried together, allowing ourselves to reminisce about the joyful moments we had shared. It was cathartic, like releasing a dam that had been holding back our grief for too long. One evening, during one of our gatherings, I found myself suggesting we return to Epping Forest. The words tumbled out before I could second-guess myself, but as soon as I said them, I felt a spark of hope. "We need to go back," I proposed. "Not to find her, but to confront what happened. We need to reclaim our narrative." Marcus and Sarah exchanged glances, and a silence enveloped the room. "Are you sure about that?" Marcus finally asked, concern etched on his face. "It's a dark place for us, Jimmy." "I know," I replied, my voice steady. "But I think we need to face our fear. We have to understand what we encountered to find closure." After much discussion, we decided to plan a return trip, one armed with knowledge and a determination to honor Lila's memory. As the day approached, I felt a mix of trepidation and excitement. This wasn't just a journey back to a physical location. It was an expedition into the heart of our fears, a chance to grow from the shadows that had haunted us. The day of the trip arrived, and with it, a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in a long time. We drove to the forest, the familiar trees looming overhead, their presence both intimidating and strangely comforting. Each step we took deeper into the woods felt like a reclamation, a way to transform our memories from a source of pain to a testament of resilience. When we reached the clearing, my heart raced. It was a different place now, the echoes of the past mingling with the present. I felt a sense of reverence as we stood together, a small circle of solidarity. We shared our memories of Lila, celebrating her spirit and the light she had brought into our lives. We placed flowers in the ground, a small tribute to the friend we had lost, and as we did so, I felt a weight lift from my chest. In that moment, I understood that growth was not just about moving forward. It was about learning to live with the past, finding strength in vulnerability, and honoring those we had lost. The forest around us felt different. It was still alive, but now it pulsed with a sense of acceptance. We had faced our fears, and in doing so, we had transformed them into a source of strength. Returning from the forest, I felt lighter, as if I had shed the heavy cloak of guilt that had bound me for so long. My heart still ached for Lila, but now I carried her memory with me as a guiding light. Together, we had overcome the darkness that had threatened to consume us, forging a path toward healing and growth. The experience had changed me profoundly, teaching me that even in the face of terror, we have the power to reclaim our narrative and find hope in the shadows. As the weeks passed since our return from Epping Forest, life had settled into an uneasy normalcy. While the heaviness of our grief lingered, a sense of determination began to swell within me. I had shared my idea of returning to the forest with Marcus and Sarah, and while they had initially hesitated, they eventually agreed. They understood, as I did, that facing the source of our trauma was the only way to begin truly healing. We planned our return meticulously, determined to do things differently this time. We would approach the forest with reverence, armed not only with our memories but also with an array of supplies, flashlights, first aid kits, and ample provisions. We sought the guidance of experienced hikers, reading guides, and gathering tips to navigate the treacherous terrain. Most importantly, we resolved to stick together, to support one another through whatever lay ahead. As the day of our return approached, I felt a mix of excitement and dread. The forest that had once filled me with wonder now seemed like a sinister entity, a labyrinth of dark memories intertwined with the beauty of nature. But I knew that facing it was essential for us to reclaim our sense of agency. We chose a weekend in early autumn when the leaves would be turning vibrant hues, hoping that the forest's natural beauty could help temper the memories of our past experiences. In the days leading up to our expedition, I found myself revisiting the moments of our first trip. I immersed myself in the photos I had taken during our exploration, focusing on the joy and camaraderie we had shared. I found solace in the memories of Lila's laughter echoing through the trees, the way her eyes lit up at the discovery of something beautiful. Each image served as a reminder of why we had come to the forest in the first place. Our shared love for adventure and the thrill of uncovering the unknown. On the night before our trip, I couldn't sleep. The weight of anticipation hung heavily in the air, and my mind raced with possibilities. What would we find? Would the forest welcome us, or would it unleash the horrors of our past once more? I paced my small apartment, glancing at the supplies we had laid out on the kitchen table. A map of the forest, packed lunches, and a small bouquet of flowers for Lila. It felt surreal, preparing to confront the very place that had altered the course of our lives so drastically. Morning arrived with a crispness in the air that hinted at autumn's embrace. As I drove to the meeting point where Marcus and Sarah were waiting, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The sun hung low in the sky, casting golden rays that illuminated the road ahead. When I arrived, I was greeted by their familiar faces, each one mirroring my own mix of determination and anxiety. "Ready for this?" Marcus asked, a hint of nervousness underlying his bravado. "More than ever," I replied, though I couldn't help but feel the tremor in my voice. With our supplies loaded into my truck, we made our way to the forest entrance. The excitement in the air was palpable, mingled with the weight of our shared experiences. As we stepped into the familiar embrace of the trees, I took a deep breath, inhaling the earthy scent of damp foliage and pine. The forest felt different this time. It was alive with the sounds of nature, birds chirping, leaves rustling in the gentle breeze. Yet, as we ventured deeper, I sensed an undercurrent of tension, a feeling that we were being watched. Each crack of a twig beneath our feet echoed ominously, stirring a primal instinct to remain vigilant. We made our way to the clearing where Lila had vanished, moving cautiously as we traversed the uneven terrain. The path was overgrown, the underbrush thick with brambles and fallen leaves. I could feel the memories bubbling to the surface, and I glanced at Marcus and Sarah, who shared knowing looks that spoke volumes. When we finally arrived at the clearing, the atmosphere shifted. The sun cast a gentle light through the canopy above, illuminating the space where we had last seen Lila. It was a beautiful spot, tranquil in its stillness, but the ghosts of our memories loomed heavy around us. We set our packs down, and I pulled out the bouquet of flowers we had brought. "This is for Lila," I said, my voice barely above a whisper as I knelt to place the flowers on the ground. Marcus and Sarah joined me, and together we formed a circle, a small act of remembrance that felt both empowering and somber. As we stood there, I felt a wave of emotion wash over me. It was as if Lila's spirit enveloped us, urging us to confront our fears and acknowledge the loss we had experienced. We began to share our thoughts, reflecting on what Lila meant to each of us. The conversation flowed, a healing balm that soothed the deep cuts left by her absence. "Do you think she would want us to be here?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling with emotion. "Of course," I replied, feeling a surge of resolve. "She loved this place. She would want us to remember her joy, not just the tragedy." With that, we decided to explore the clearing further, determined to uncover its secrets rather than retreat in fear. As we fanned out, the forest revealed itself in ways we had previously overlooked. The intricate patterns of bark on trees, the delicate webbing of a spider spinning its home, and the subtle sounds of wildlife hidden among the undergrowth. We spent hours roaming the area, taking photographs and documenting our findings. The atmosphere began to shift. The forest, which had once felt oppressive, now appeared alive with possibility. Laughter returned to our group as we engaged in light-hearted banter, gradually shedding the weight of our sorrow. It was a small victory, a testament to our resilience. But just as I began to feel a sense of normalcy returning, the air grew heavy once more. An unnatural chill swept through the clearing, causing the hairs on my neck to stand on end. It felt as if the forest was responding to our presence, reminding us of the darkness we had uncovered previously. The laughter faded, replaced by an uneasy silence that seemed to envelop us. "Did anyone else feel that?" Marcus asked, glancing around as if searching for answers in the trees. I nodded, my heart racing. "Yeah, it's like something has shifted." Before we could react, the ground beneath us trembled ever so slightly, a subtle vibration that sent a shiver down my spine. I exchanged worried glances with Marcus and Sarah, and my mind raced with the implications. Were we stirring something we shouldn't have? Had we unknowingly crossed a threshold into a realm where the boundaries of the living and the dead intertwined? As I looked into the depths of the forest, I felt an overwhelming compulsion to uncover the truth. This time, we were not just explorers. We were warriors, prepared to confront whatever malevolent force lurked within the shadows. We had come to honor Lila, but perhaps our journey would lead us to uncover secrets buried deep within the earth. With our hearts pounding and the forest growing eerily quiet around us, we steeled ourselves for what was to come. The air crackled with tension as we took a collective breath, ready to face the unknown. Whatever lay ahead, we would confront it together, a united front against the darkness that had once threatened to tear us apart. The stillness in the forest was deafening, broken only by the sound of our breathing and the rustle of leaves overhead. The atmosphere felt charged, as if the very air was anticipating the confrontation that was about to unfold. My heart raced, not just from fear but from a sense of purpose. I had to know what had happened to Lila, and I couldn't back down now. "Did you hear that?" Sarah whispered, her eyes wide as she scanned the treeline. The palpable tension made my skin crawl. I nodded, though I didn't trust my voice to respond. The ground beneath our feet seemed to pulse, vibrating subtly as if the forest was alive, breathing alongside us. "Let's stick together," Marcus urged, stepping closer to us. His presence was reassuring, a reminder that we were not alone in this moment. Whatever is happening, we face it together. As we ventured deeper into the clearing, I noticed something I hadn't before, a low, dark shape partially obscured by foliage. It wasn't natural. It had edges and angles that seemed too perfect, too intentional for the wild chaos of the forest. My pulse quickened as I approached it, the ground beneath my feet feeling more unstable with every step. "What is that?" I murmured, glancing back at Sarah and Marcus, who shared my concern. "Only one way to find out," Marcus replied, taking a tentative step closer to the structure. As we reached it, I realized it was a stone altar, weathered and cracked, its surface etched with markings that appeared to be ancient symbols. They twisted and curled like vines, forming patterns that seemed to dance in the dim light filtering through the trees. An unsettling realization settled in my gut. This was no ordinary altar. It felt like a sacrificial site, steeped in a dark history that resonated through the very earth. "What were they doing here?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling as she traced her fingers over the symbols. "This feels wrong." A sudden chill swept through the clearing, and I instinctively took a step back. The wind picked up, swirling leaves around us like a vortex. The feeling of being watched intensified, a prickling sensation creeping down my spine. I looked at Marcus, who had gone pale, and then at Sarah, whose face mirrored my own fear. Suddenly, a whisper echoed through the trees, low and haunting. It wasn't just the wind. It felt like a voice, an echo from the past. My heart raced as the sound wrapped around us, pulling at the edges of my consciousness. "Lila," I breathed, feeling a surge of desperation. "Did you hear that?" Marcus asked, his eyes darting nervously. "Yes, it's coming from the altar." I pointed, feeling a strange compulsion to move closer. The whispering intensified, becoming a cacophony of voices pleading, warning, and calling out. We stepped toward the altar, drawn in by an unseen force. As we reached it, the symbols on the stone began to glow faintly, illuminating the dark space around us. A vision unfolded in my mind, vivid and disorienting. I saw a group of figures gathered around the altar, their faces shrouded in shadows. They were chanting, their voices merging into a powerful incantation that echoed through the centuries. "Lila!" I shouted, the name tearing from my throat as if it could bridge the chasm between the past and present. "Where are you?" In that moment, I felt a rush of energy surge through me, a connection to the spirits that had lingered here. The air thickened, and I stumbled back, grasping Marcus's arm for support. The chanting grew louder, drowning out my thoughts, enveloping us in a cacophony of voices that became increasingly frantic. Suddenly, the earth shook beneath us, the ground trembling as if the very forest was awakening. Roots twisted and cracked, pushing up through the soil, their tendrils snaking toward us. I felt the urge to run, to escape the chaos surrounding us, but my feet were rooted in place, caught in a web of terror and curiosity. "Fight it!" Sarah screamed, her eyes wild as she struggled against the pull of the altar. "We have to break the connection." In that instant, I remembered the flowers we had left for Lila, a symbol of our love and remembrance. Desperate to reach her spirit, I turned and sprinted back to where we had laid them. I grabbed the bouquet, its vibrant colors stark against the dark earth. "Lila, we're here. We won't leave you," I cried, clutching the flowers as I raced back to Marcus and Sarah. The ground shook violently as I reached them, and I hurled the bouquet onto the altar, watching as the blooms burst apart, petals scattering like ashes in the wind. In that moment, the whispering halted, replaced by a profound silence. The glow from the altar dimmed, and the air felt heavy with anticipation. "Lila," I called again, my voice breaking as I felt the weight of despair lifting. "We love you. Come back to us." For a heartbeat, time stood still. The shadows around us swirled, coalescing into a single form that emerged from the darkness, a figure with familiar features, surrounded by a soft light. It was Lila, her face radiant yet tinged with sadness. "Jimmy," she whispered, her voice ethereal, echoing through the clearing like a sweet melody. "You shouldn't have come back." "No, I had to," I pleaded, tears streaming down my face. "We need you. We miss you." The forest sighed, and the air thickened again, filled with an overwhelming sense of grief. "There are things you cannot change," Lila said, her voice laced with sorrow. "I was meant to stay. You must let me go." "No, we can't," Sarah cried, stepping forward. "We want you back. We need you. Your journey is not over, but mine is," Lila replied, her form flickering as if caught between worlds. "You must remember me, but you cannot hold on to what was lost. Find your way forward." As she spoke, the forest pulsed, and the shadows began to recede, revealing the beauty of the trees and sunlight once more. The altar cracked and crumbled, the dark energy that had permeated the area dissipating like smoke in the breeze. "No, Lila," I shouted, reaching out as her figure began to fade. "Please." But she smiled softly, her eyes glistening with tears of her own. "I will always be with you." And with that, she vanished into the light, leaving behind an echo of laughter that danced on the wind. The forest fell silent once more, but this time the air felt lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted. I fell to my knees, overwhelmed with emotion. Marcus and Sarah rushed to my side, their expressions a mix of relief and sorrow. "We did it," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "She's free." As the reality of what had transpired sank in, I felt a profound sense of loss and yet an undeniable hope. We had faced our fears, confronted the darkness of the past, and emerged stronger. The forest, once a source of terror, now felt like a sacred space, a place of remembrance and healing. "Let's go home," Marcus said, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. As we turned to leave, I glanced back at the altar, now just a pile of stones and memories. I knew that Lila would always be a part of us, guiding us forward as we continued our journey through life. With a final breath, I whispered, "Goodbye, Lila," and stepped into the sunlight, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. As we made our way back through Epping Forest, the air felt different, imbued with a sense of renewal that had been absent before. The shadows that had loomed over us, heavy with grief and dread, had lifted, leaving a clarity that was almost palpable. I could still feel the remnants of Lila's presence lingering in the gentle breeze, a soft whisper in my ear urging me to move forward and embrace the life that still awaited me. The journey had transformed us, marking a stark contrast to the fear and confusion we had faced when we first entered the forest. Each step was lighter, and the path ahead seemed illuminated, no longer shrouded in the darkness of the unknown. We were not just survivors of a haunting experience. We had become allies in the face of the supernatural, bonded by the shared pain of loss and the profound love that transcended it. Marcus, usually the stoic one, walked alongside me, his expression softened by the weight of understanding. "You did well back there," he said, breaking the silence. "You reached her. That took a lot of courage." His words were like a balm, soothing the raw edges of my heart. "Yeah," I replied, a lump forming in my throat, "but it doesn't feel like I did enough. I should have brought her back." "Don't think like that," Sarah interjected, her voice steady and reassuring. "You freed her spirit. That's what she needed. She didn't belong to this world anymore." As we reached the forest's edge, the sunlight broke through the trees, casting warm rays upon us. I paused for a moment, taking in the sight of the outside world, bustling with life, color, and possibility. The realization struck me. The adventure hadn't just been about facing the horrors of the past. It was also about embracing the future. Lila's message rang clear in my mind. I had to let go to move on, to find solace in the memories while forging my own path ahead. The days that followed were filled with reflection and healing. I sought counseling to help process the trauma we had endured and to honor Lila's memory in a meaningful way. I decided to dedicate my future archaeological work to understanding the history and myths that surrounded the ancient sites we studied, ensuring that the stories of those who came before us were remembered. In time, I found comfort in creating a small memorial for Lila, a collection of flowers and artifacts that represented her spirit and the love we shared. It became a space not just for grief but for celebration, a reminder that life, even amidst loss, continued to thrive. As the seasons changed and time moved on, the scars of that experience began to fade, though they would never fully disappear. They served as a reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of cherishing each moment. Epping Forest had been a place of terror, but it had also become a sanctuary of healing. I returned there often, not out of fear or trepidation, but to pay homage to Lila and the journey we had taken together. With every visit, I felt her spirit guiding me, pushing me to embrace the adventures that lay ahead with open arms. Ultimately, I had learned that life was an intricate tapestry woven from threads of joy, sorrow, love, and loss. Though Lila was no longer physically with me, her memory lived on in my heart, a gentle reminder to pursue my passions fearlessly and to live each day to the fullest. In that way, she would always be a part of my story, a guiding light through the shadows, forever inspiring me to seek the extraordinary in the ordinary moments of life. Years later, I found myself leading a group of young archaeologists through Epping Forest, sharing the tales of its haunted history and the lessons I had learned. The air was crisp, and laughter echoed through the trees, blending with the whispers of the past. As we paused at Lila's memorial, I felt a familiar warmth envelop me. It was as if she were there, encouraging me to continue sharing our story. With every word, I honored her memory, knowing that even in the darkest moments, love prevails. I would forever cherish the bond we shared, a testament to our adventure. If you found this story intriguing, don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced something eerie in the woods or encountered the unknown? Join the conversation and share your own stories with us. Also, be sure to subscribe for more chilling tales and adventures that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Click the link to check out our next video, where we delve deeper into the mysteries of haunted places around the world. Your next adventure awaits. Don't miss it.